The cold winds blew fiercely across the barren land, a harsh and unforgiving world where few creatures could survive. Alien ships hovered silently above the rocky surface, casting long shadows over the alien landscape. The creatures that inhabited this world were some of the most terrifying beings in the galaxy. Their sheer size, strength, and vicious nature made them the stuff of nightmares for anyone foolish enough to face them. Yet today, the aliens who had come to conquer this world were filled with uncertainty. They had never faced a threat like this before. The creatures they sought to defeat were apex predators, towering beasts with teeth sharp enough to tear through metal. They had claws that could shred anything in their path, and their speed and agility were unmatched. It was believed that no one could survive an encounter with these creatures. The aliens, highly advanced in technology and strategy, had come to this planet expecting a quick and easy victory. They thought that nothing could stop them from achieving their goal, but they were wrong. On the surface, a single human stood among the rocks, calm and collected. His appearance was unremarkable, a simple man in rugged clothes, but his demeanor spoke of something much more. The aliens watched from above, unsure of what they were seeing. The human was alone, and the predator he was about to face was unlike anything they had ever encountered before. For a moment, the aliens wondered if the human had lost his mind. What was he thinking, standing there so confidently? Didn't he know the danger? Didn't he realize the fate that awaited him? The first of the apex predators emerged from the shadows, its massive form looming over the landscape like a living mountain. The ground trembled with each step it took. Its dark eyes locked onto the human, sensing him as prey. It growled deeply, a sound that could send chills down anyone's spine. The human didn't move. He didn't even flinch. The alien forces above watched closely, intrigued and anxious. They had heard stories of humans, but they couldn't quite believe it. How could one of them stand against such a beast? The predator's eyes gleamed with malice as it lunged, its claws slashing through the air like deadly blades. The aliens held their breath, waiting for the inevitable. But the human did something unexpected. He moved with a speed and grace that shouldn't have been possible for someone his size. In a blur, he dodged the predator's strike, his body twisting and turning with incredible precision. It was as if he knew exactly where the predator would strike before it even moved. The alien soldiers, watching from their ships, began to murmur in disbelief. They hadn't expected this. They hadn't expected him to be fast enough. The predator, stunned for a moment, turned on the human again, roaring in fury. It swiped with its claws, but the human was already in motion. He ducked, rolled, and sprang to his feet with the agility of a trained fighter. The predator's movements were powerful, but slow compared to the humans. The alien forces began to realize that this was no ordinary human. There was something different about him, something they couldn't quite understand. He wasn't afraid. In fact, he seemed to be enjoying the fight. The human's movements were smooth and calculated. He avoided each strike with ease, his eyes never leaving the predator for a second. It was almost as if he was anticipating each move, reading the creature's every intention. The predator's frustration grew, its roars becoming more desperate as it tried to land a blow. But the human was always one step ahead. The aliens began to question everything they thought they knew about combat. This wasn't a typical fight. This wasn't just a man facing a beast. It was a battle between two forces of nature, each trying to prove its dominance. In that moment, something shifted. The human saw an opening. As the predator lunged at him once again, the human dodged, but this time he didn't just move to the side. He moved toward the creature, closing the distance between them with shocking speed. The aliens watched in awe as the human grappled with the predator, using its own momentum against it. With incredible strength, the human twisted and struck, delivering blows to the creature's vulnerable spots. The predator roared in pain, struggling to break free, but the human's grip was unyielding. It was then that the aliens realized the truth. This wasn't a simple fight. It wasn't even a battle for survival. This human was not just trying to defend himself. He was trying to prove something. He wasn't here to be a victim. He was here to dominate, to show the predator that it was not the strongest creature on this planet. The predator, despite its terrifying power, was now the one fighting for its life. The battle raged on, and the aliens watched in stunned silence. Their confidence began to crumble as they saw the predator, the one creature they had thought was invincible, being brought to its knees by a single human. It was as though the laws of nature had been turned upside down. The human was no longer just a man facing a monster. He had become something more, something terrifying in his own right. And as the fight continued, the aliens realized that they had made a grave mistake. They had underestimated the humans. They had thought they could easily conquer this world and destroy its most fearsome creatures. But now, they were witnessing something far more terrifying than they could ever have imagined. The raw, untamable power of a human, standing against an apex predator and defying all logic. The aliens, once so sure of their victory, began to question their next move. What were they up against now? The battle between the human and the apex predator continued with a fierce intensity that shook the very ground beneath them. The predator's roars echoed across the desolate landscape, filling the air with a sense of primal fury. But the human, despite the chaos around him, remained unnervingly calm. His eyes were locked on the creature, as if he had done this 1,000 times before. Each movement was deliberate, each dodge a testament to his incredible skill. The predators were powerful, their jaws large enough to crush bones with a single snap, and their claws capable of rending steel. Yet, the human seemed to anticipate every strike, every attempt to break his defense. With each swing of its massive claws, the apex predator tried to land a lethal blow, but the human moved like water flowing around rocks, slippery, unpredictable, and impossible to pin down. His movements were so fast that they blurred, the predator's strikes missing by mere inches. The alien forces above, watching through their advanced technology, had never seen anything like this before. This wasn't a fight for survival. It was a display of something more. The human wasn't simply defending himself. He was fighting with purpose, with a resolve that shook the very core of the alien onlookers. The predator rode in frustration as the human continued to evade its attacks, growing more aggressive with each failed strike. Its desperation became apparent, and the aliens could sense the shift in the creature's behavior. It was no longer the confident hunter. Now, it was the prey, scrambling to find a way to overpower the human. But the human didn't seem to care about the predator's increasing fury. He was unfazed by its attempts, almost as if he enjoyed the challenge. His eyes never left the beast, and his stance was steady, ready for whatever came next. Then, in an unexpected move, the human closed the gap between them. The predator lunged again, its jaws snapping shut with deadly force. But the human ducked and rolled under the beast, moving faster than the predator could react. The alien forces watching from above could hardly keep up with the speed of the fight. They had never seen a creature, let alone a human, so skilled in combat. The human's agility and strength were pushing the predator to its limits, forcing it to fight at a pace it wasn't accustomed to. The human seized the opportunity. In one fluid motion, he grabbed hold of the predator's massive leg, pulling it off balance. The predator, stunned for just a moment, struggled to regain its footing. It was a critical error, one that would cost it dearly. The human was on top of it in an instant, his fists pounding down on the creature's vulnerable spots with brutal force. The predator howled in pain, its attempts to escape becoming weaker with each strike. The aliens watched in horror as their supposed victory began to slip away. The predator, once a symbol of unstoppable power, was being torn apart by this human. It was as if the predator's strength and ferocity were meaningless in the face of the human's raw determination. With each blow the human delivered, it became clear that the predator was no longer the dominant force on the battlefield. The fight was turning in the human's favor. The predator, panting heavily and bloodied from the blows, seemed to slow down. Its movements became more sluggish, its roars less frequent. The human, on the other hand, was still as relentless as ever. There was no sign of exhaustion in him, no indication that he was losing steam. The aliens began to feel a deep unease. They had witnessed many battles in their time, but nothing had prepared them for this. The human was something else, something beyond what they had expected. In a final decisive move, the human launched himself at the predator. With a roar of his own, he drove his fists into the creature's chest, cracking the thick armor-like hide. The predator staggered backward, its strength failing it at last. It stumbled and collapsed onto the ground, its mighty limbs twitching in the final throes of death. The human stood over it, bloody but unbroken, his chest heaving as he caught his breath. He had done it. He had defeated the apex predator with his bare hands, something that no one thought was possible. The alien forces, still watching from their ships above, were frozen in shock. The predator, which had been their greatest weapon, was now nothing more than a lifeless carcass. The human, once thought to be a weak, fragile creature, had just proven that he was capable of things that defied logic. The aliens had come to conquer this world, expecting an easy victory over its inhabitants. But now, they were faced with the terrifying realization that they had underestimated not just the predator, but the human species itself. The human turned his gaze toward the sky, looking up at the alien ships above. His eyes were fierce, filled with a fire that the aliens could not ignore. He had proven his strength, his dominance, and now he was challenging them. He wasn't just a survivor. He was a force of nature, and he was ready for whatever came next. The aliens, their plans crumbling before them, knew that they were facing an enemy unlike any they had ever encountered. The human had sent a clear message. This world and its inhabitants would not be easily conquered. The hunt had turned on its hunters, and now the aliens found themselves on the edge of a terrifying new reality. The human had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The alien forces began to retreat, unsure of what to do next, leaving the human standing alone on the planet, victorious. The ground trembled beneath the human's feet as he stood over the lifeless body of the apex predator, his chest rising and falling with each heavy breath. The air was thick with the scent of blood and the remnants of the battle. The predator, once a symbol of unstoppable force, was now just another broken beast lying in the dust. Around him, the alien ships hovered in eerie silence, their powerful weapons, once aimed at the creatures of this world, now directed at the man who had defeated their greatest enemy. From their ships high above, the aliens could only watch in disbelief. They had come to conquer, to destroy, but instead, they had witnessed a display of strength that none of their technology or tactics could have predicted. The human had proven that he was something far more dangerous than they had imagined. They had expected a weak species, easily subdued by their superior power. What they had encountered was a force of nature, a human who had taken down the apex predator with nothing but his bare hands. The shock of what they had seen sent ripples of fear through their ranks. The human didn't seem to notice the alien ships above him. His eyes, once locked on the predator, now shifted upward, meeting the cold, calculating eyes of the alien forces. His posture was unyielding, his expression a mixture of determination and quiet defiance. It was as if he knew that his victory over the predator was only the beginning. The real challenge was yet to come. The alien commanders, watching from their command center, exchanged uneasy glances. They had expected this mission to be simple: take control of the planet, eliminate the apex predators, and claim the resources for themselves. But now they were faced with a new reality. They had underestimated the humans. They had no idea how they had done it, how a single human could take on a creature so deadly, so terrifying, and come out victorious. But one thing was certain: they could not leave this planet without dealing with this human. The threat he posed was too great to ignore. As the minutes ticked by, the tension in the air grew palpable. The human, standing amidst the wreckage of his battle, never wavered. His eyes never left the alien ships above, as if he were daring them to make the first move. The aliens, still unsure of what to do, hesitated. They had never encountered a creature like this before, one that could stand against their technology and defeat their most powerful weapon. The human took a step forward, his boots crunching against the rocky terrain. He moved with purpose, his every step a declaration of his strength. The aliens watched as he walked calmly toward the edge of the battlefield, his gaze never leaving the hovering ships. The air around him seemed to crackle with an unspoken challenge. It was as if he was daring them to descend and face him directly. His message was clear. He was not afraid, and he was ready for whatever came next. The alien commanders, growing more anxious by the second, finally gave the order to deploy their forces. It was time to see if their weapons, their advanced technology, could do what the Predator could not. The alien ships began to descend, their engines humming as they lowered themselves to the ground. The soldiers aboard the ships prepared for battle, their weapons powered up and ready. They were not sure what to expect, but they knew one thing for certain: the human had to be stopped. As the first of the alien soldiers disembarked, the human stopped in his tracks. He stood tall, unafraid, as the alien troops began to surround him. There were more of them now, and they were armed with advanced weaponry that could easily cut through any ordinary creature. But the human wasn't ordinary. His eyes scanned the alien soldiers, taking in their movements, their stance. He knew what was coming, and he was ready. The tension in the air was thick, the silence heavy with anticipation. One of the alien soldiers, a hulking figure clad in sleek armor, stepped forward. He raised his weapon and pointed it directly at the human. "You are a fool," the alien growled, his voice cold and menacing. "You have no idea what you're up against." The human didn't reply. He didn't need to. Instead, he simply cracked his knuckles and took a step forward, as if the threat of alien weapons didn't concern him in the least. The soldier hesitated, his finger twitching on the trigger. But before he could make a move, the human lunged. The fight that followed was unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. The human moved faster than their weapons could track, dodging laser blasts and retaliating with brutal strikes that sent alien soldiers flying. The battlefield became a blur of motion as the human used his bare hands to tear through the alien forces. Each punch, each kick, each movement was calculated and precise. The aliens, despite their advanced training and technology, couldn't keep up with him. The aliens had underestimated the human once again. They thought that their weapons, their technology, would give them the upper hand. But the human was more than a match for their firepower. His raw strength, his speed, and his relentless will made him an unstoppable force. He wasn't just fighting to survive. He was fighting to prove that no one, not even the most advanced alien force in the galaxy, could defeat him. With every alien soldier that fell, the others began to retreat, their confidence shattered. The human, still unscathed, pressed on, his eyes filled with fury and determination. He wasn't going to stop until they knew exactly what humanity was capable of. As the last of the alien soldiers fled, the human stood alone on the battlefield, breathing heavily but victorious. The alien ships, now retreating into the sky, left him standing in the dust. The battle was over, but the war had just begun. The human had shown the galaxy what it meant to face a human, and the aliens would never forget the terror they had felt as they watched him rip apart their greatest weapons with his bare hands. The message had been sent, and now the aliens knew one thing for certain: humans were not to be underestimated. The silence that followed the retreat of the alien ships was almost deafening. The human, covered in blood and dirt from the battle, stood alone in the middle of the battlefield, his chest rising and falling with each labored breath. His eyes were sharp, scanning the horizon as if expecting the aliens to return at any moment. But for now, the alien ships were gone, their dark shapes disappearing into the sky, leaving nothing but the echoes of their departure. The human didn't take a moment to rest. There was no time for celebration, No time to bask in his victory. He had proven something today, something that no one had thought possible. He had taken on an apex predator and defeated it with his bare hands. Then he had faced an entire alien force, armed with weapons beyond human comprehension, and come out victorious. But the war wasn't over. The aliens would regroup, and they would come back. And when they did, the human would be ready. He didn't know how much time had passed, but the atmosphere around him had shifted. The once violent winds seemed to have calmed, the dust settling in the wake of the chaos. He turned his gaze to the ground, where the remains of the predator lay, a grim reminder of what had occurred. The alien forces may have underestimated him, but now they knew better. They had seen firsthand what humans were capable of. But what would come next? The human didn't have answers, only more questions. He had defeated their greatest weapon, their most feared beast, and sent their soldiers running. But what was the true extent of their power? How many more forces could they throw at him? The predators may have been the apex of this world, but the aliens had technology that could obliterate entire cities, planets even. And yet, they had been forced to retreat, leaving him standing alone as the victor. The human took a deep breath and turned away from the battlefield. There was no time to dwell on the past. His eyes narrowed as he scanned the horizon once more. He could still sense the presence of the alien ships, their massive forms retreating beyond the planet's atmosphere. But he knew they weren't gone for good. They would return. They would bring their full force to bear, and they would do whatever it took to take him down. But the human didn't fear them. He had already proven that he could face the unimaginable and come out on top. Now, he had something that no alien force could take away from him: confidence. And with that confidence, he knew he could take on whatever came next. He was not just a survivor, he was a force of nature. His mind raced as he considered his next move. He couldn't just sit back and wait for the aliens to return. He needed to strike first. He needed to show them that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The predators of this world had already learned that lesson the hard way. Now, it was the aliens' turn. He had no doubt they would come back with greater numbers, with more advanced weapons. But he would be ready. He glanced down at his hands, the hands that had ripped apart an apex predator, the hands that had taken down alien soldiers with nothing but his bare strength. They were bruised, battered, but still strong. And as long as they were strong, he would continue to fight. He would fight for his survival. He would fight for humanity. And if the aliens thought they could just wipe out his species without consequence, they were in for a rude awakening. The human took a step forward, his boots crunching against the rocky terrain. His eyes were set on the distant horizon, where the alien ships had vanished. He didn't know where they had gone, but he knew they would be back. And when they returned, they would find something they hadn't expected: a human who would never stop fighting. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. The human was ready for whatever came next. With every step he took, he sent a message to the universe. Humanity would not bow down. Humanity would not be conquered. They had already faced their greatest challenges and come out victorious. And when the aliens returned, they would face a human who would tear through their forces with the same ferocity and strength that had brought him victory in the first battle. As he disappeared into the distance, his figure growing smaller against the vast expanse of the planet, one thing was certain: the alien forces would never forget the day they had seen a human defeat an apex predator and send their armies fleeing. The universe had just witnessed the power of humanity, and there was no turning back now. The universe had just witnessed the impossible. The alien forces, once confident in their superior technology and military prowess, had been humiliated by a single human. The shock of their defeat lingered in the air, thick and suffocating. But as the human walked away from the battlefield, the distant rumble of the retreating alien ships was far from a victory for him. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The aliens would regroup. They would learn from their mistakes, and when they came back, they would come back stronger. But the human was ready. Time passed in the shadow of the first victory, but the feeling of unease never left the human. He couldn't afford to rest. He couldn't afford to let his guard down. He had seen the power of the alien forces, what they were capable of. They had underestimated him once, but they would not make that mistake again. The next time, they would come with everything they had. The human knew he couldn't fight alone forever. He couldn't rely solely on his strength and skill. The alien forces were too numerous, their weapons too powerful. But as he stood there, thinking of the war to come, a sense of resolve washed over him. He wasn't alone anymore. He had already shown humanity's strength, and now he would unite them. He would make sure the entire planet knew the truth. Humanity wasn't just a species to be crushed. They were fighters, survivors, and they would stand their ground. It wasn't long before other humans, survivors of the initial attack, those who had witnessed the humans' victory, began to rise up. They saw the power he had displayed, and they felt the stirrings of hope in their hearts. The humans' fight wasn't just his own anymore. It was theirs. Across the world, resistance groups formed. People who had once been oppressed, who had been told they were weak, began to stand tall. They began to fight back. Meanwhile, the alien forces, licking their wounds, plotted their return. They had underestimated the humans, and now they would come back in full force. The alien commanders knew their first assault had been a failure, but they were not ready to give up. They had advanced technology, superior weaponry, and an army that could wipe out entire civilizations. But they were facing something they had never expected, a species that refused to be defeated. The human, now leading the resistance, didn't know how long he had before the aliens returned. But he knew one thing for sure: they couldn't let them succeed. The fight for survival was about to get much harder. They would have to adapt. They would have to outsmart the aliens, use their terrain, their environment, to their advantage. But above all, they would have to believe in their strength. Months passed, and the humans' leadership grew stronger. The resistance became more coordinated, more organized. What began as a few scattered groups became a united front, an army of humans determined to protect their world. The human had become their symbol of strength, of hope, of defiance. The aliens, meanwhile, were preparing for their final assault. They had brought reinforcements from across the galaxy, new weapons that could tear through even the most fortified human defenses. They had learned from their first defeat, but they still underestimated one thing: the spirit of the human race. The day came when the aliens landed once again, this time with their full force. Thousands of ships filled the skies, blocking out the sun. The ground shook as their massive war machines stomped across the planet's surface. The human, now standing at the head of an army, stood tall and unyielding. His people were ready. They had trained, they had fought, and they had learned. The aliens may have had the technology, but the humans had something far more powerful: their will to survive. The battle that ensued was unlike any other. Alien ships rained fire down upon human cities, while ground forces advanced with unstoppable force. But the human resistance was no longer disorganized or scattered. They fought with precision, using guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and the terrain to their advantage. The human forces were everywhere, striking swiftly and retreating into the shadows before the aliens could retaliate. The alien commanders, confident that they would crush the humans in this second wave, soon found themselves in over their heads. They had underestimated the resilience of the human race. The humans had learned from their past mistakes. They knew how to fight back now. And in the heart of the battle, standing among his people, the human who had started it all moved with the same deadly precision that had allowed him to defeat the apex predator and alien forces alike. He fought like a whirlwind, cutting down alien soldiers one after another. The once terrifying alien forces were now on the defensive, struggling to maintain their ground. They had been prepared for a world to conquer, but not for the humans who had fought for their very survival. In the midst of the chaos, the alien commanders realized that they had made the same mistake again. They had thought they were unstoppable. But what they were facing was not just a fight for survival. It was a fight for humanity's place in the universe. The human leader, bloody but still standing tall, knew that this was the moment that